hope. Like, everybody supports one another, but then you have the professional sports teams, and that's what everybody's most passionate about here, and that's what I love about it.
Caitlin Clark returned to the court after 239 long days away, and what should have been a triumphant comeback quickly turned into one of the most controversial stories in women's basketball. The arena in San Juan was electric before the opening tip even happened. Cameras followed her every move. Fans packed the stands hoping to witness the return of the player who changed the sport forever. But beneath the cheers and the excitement, something fell off. This was not just a basketball tournament. It was a power struggle unfolding in real time. For months, people had wondered if Caitlin Clark would ever look the same again. For separate injuries had derailed her sophomore WNBA season. Groin problems, muscle strains, a painful bone bruise. One setback after another. By September of 2025, her season was officially over. Critics quietly started whispering dangerous questions. Had the constant pressure finally broken her body? Was the most marketable athlete in women's basketball already beginning to wear down? Some even wondered if the league's brightest star had peaked too early. Then March 11th arrived. When Clark stepped onto that floor wearing Team USA across her chest, the atmosphere changed instantly. Every camera zoomed in on her. Every fan in the building stood up. This was supposed to be her redemption moment. The return of the superstar who transformed women's basketball into must-watch television. The player who shattered scoring records, sold out arenas across America, and brought millions of new fans into the sport. But instead of being welcomed as the centerpiece of Team USA, Caitlin Clark found herself shoved into the background. Before the tournament even started, Clark spoke to reporters with complete humility. She told everyone she was not expecting special treatment. She openly admitted that Team USA was bigger than any one player. She said she understood she would have to fit into the system. The comments were mature, respectful, and team-oriented. She sounded grateful just to be healthy enough to play again. And that is exactly why what happened next shocked so many people. When head coach Kara Lawson announced the starting lineup for Team USA's opening game, Caitlin Clark's name was missing. The crowd reaction was immediate. Confusion spread across social media within seconds. Fans could not believe that the biggest star in women's basketball, the player everyone came to see, was sitting on the bench. Analysts tried to defend the decision. They argued Lawson wanted balance. They claimed Team USA had too much talent to focus on one player. Some said it was simply about experimenting with rotations. But then the game started. And everything changed. Clark entered midway through the first quarter, and within moments, the entire pace of the game exploded. Suddenly, the offense looked alive. The ball moved faster. Defenders panicked. Passing lanes opened everywhere. Teammates started getting wide-open looks they had not seen before. In just 19 minutes off the bench, Caitlin Clark delivered a historic performance, 17 points and 12 assists in her very first senior national team game. 12 assists. Not only did she dominate the game, she nearly rewrote the record books immediately. It became one of the greatest debut performances Team USA had seen in years. The offense transformed completely the moment she stepped on the court. Even Kara Lawson admitted afterward that Clark's unit gave the team its offensive spark and took the game to another level. At that point, most people assumed the debate was over. Surely the coach had seen enough. Surely the next game would revolve around Clark. Surely Team USA understood what kind of weapon they had just unleashed. But then came Game 2. And somehow, unbelievably, Caitlin Clark was sent back to the bench again. That is when the controversy truly exploded. Because this was no longer about easing her back after injury. It was no longer about experimenting with lineups. Now people started asking a much bigger question. Why was Team USA trying so hard to limit the most dangerous offensive player in basketball? The system Lawson was running looked painfully slow. Half-court possessions dragged endlessly. Veterans controlled the ball, while Clark stood off ball waiting for touches. The offense became methodical, deliberate, cautious. Everything Caitlin Clark was not. And that was the problem. Clark's greatness has never come from slowing the game down. Her genius comes from chaos. Fast decisions. Deep threes. Instant reads. Relentless pace. She destroys defenses before they even have time to think. But Team USA seemed determined to force her into a rigid structure that completely neutralized those strengths. The difference was impossible to ignore. When Clark played, the game moved faster, and the offense looked explosive. When she sat, everything became stagnant again. Then Puerto Rico revealed the blueprint that exposed the entire system. From the opening possession, Puerto Rico made one thing crystal clear. Their entire defense was built around stopping Caitlin Clark. They deployed a brutal box-and-one scheme specifically designed to erase her from the game. One defender followed her everywhere. Every cut, every screen, every movement. She was treated like the single biggest threat on the floor.
And honestly,
that level of defensive attention should have opened the game up for everyone else. But it didn't, because Team USA had no real counterattack. No quick actions to free Clark. No off-ball movement. No pace to punish the defense. No adjustments. The offense simply slowed to a crawl while Clark fought through constant pressure. For the first time all tournament, she looked trapped. She finished with just 8 points on difficult contested shots. 2 assists. 1 three-pointer. By normal standards, that is still respectable. But for Caitlin Clark, it was considered a struggle. And the scary part was why she struggled. It was not because Puerto Rico shut down her talent. It was because the system around her completely failed to maximize her strengths. Basketball experts immediately noticed the issue. A box-and-one defense is vulnerable if you force movement, spacing, and tempo. But Team USA kept running slow half-court sets that allowed Puerto Rico's defense to stay organized. Instead of weaponizing Clark's gravity, they isolated her inside a rigid structure that played directly into the defense's hands. The result was ugly. The offense became predictable. The ball stuck. Possessions dragged late into the shot clock. Clark spent entire stretches running endlessly without ever getting clean looks. And yet through all of it, she never complained. No public frustration. No angry interviews. No visible tension. She stayed composed. Professional. Team first. That silence made the situation even louder, because fans watching at home could see exactly what was happening. This was not about chemistry anymore. This was not about balance anymore. This looked like a superstar being deliberately restrained. Social media erupted after the game. Fans accused Team USA of sabotaging their own offense. Analysts questioned why the team refused to build around the player who had completely transformed women's basketball over the previous 2 years. Some even suggested that certain people inside the basketball world were uncomfortable with how massive Clark's popularity had become. And then came the most telling moment of all. After the game, reporters directly asked Kara Lawson about Caitlin Clark's role. It was the perfect opportunity to explain the strategy, to discuss adjustments, to acknowledge the defensive schemes Clark was facing. Instead, Lawson delivered a cold, generic answer about depth, team building, and rotations. No mention of the record-breaking debut. No explanation for the stagnant offense. No discussion about why the team failed to counter Puerto Rico's defense. Nothing. Just a carefully crafted non-answer. And suddenly, people started connecting the dots. Because over the last year, a strange pattern had emerged around Caitlin Clark. Every time she succeeded, someone tried to minimize it. Every time she broke records, someone downplayed the impact. Every time fans rallied behind her, critics accused the media of exaggeration. But the numbers never lied. Attendance exploded because of Caitlin Clark. TV ratings exploded because of Caitlin Clark. Merchandise sales exploded because of Caitlin Clark. Entire arenas sold out because of Caitlin Clark. And now even Team USA looked completely different whenever Caitlin Clark touched the floor. That reality created a level of tension few people wanted to openly discuss. Because Clark's rise did not just change women's basketball. It disrupted the entire hierarchy. Veterans who had dominated headlines for years suddenly found themselves overshadowed. Coaches who preferred slower systems were now forced to adapt to a player capable of breaking defenses from 30 feet away. Traditional basketball philosophies suddenly looked outdated against the speed and spacing Clark brought to the game. And whether intentional or not, Team USA's handling of her started to feel symbolic of a much bigger battle happening inside the sport itself. Old school control versus modern offensive freedom. System basketball versus superstar creativity. Tradition versus transformation. By the end of those first 2 games, one thing became impossible to deny. Whenever Caitlin Clark was allowed to play freely, Team USA looked unstoppable. Whenever she was forced into restrictive systems, the offense immediately lost its edge. And that reality raised the question nobody could ignore anymore. If Caitlin Clark was clearly the engine capable of taking Team USA to another level, why did it feel like certain people were still afraid to fully hand her the keys? And yet, despite everything working against her, despite the reduced role, the limited minutes, the constant defensive pressure, and the slow system built to contain her instincts, Caitlin Clark was still dominating the tournament in the one way that matters most: impact. And this is the moment where the entire story changes. Because when the numbers started coming in after those first 2 games, they revealed something impossible to ignore. Even after the rough shooting night against Puerto Rico, even after spending every game coming off the bench, even after being trapped inside a rigid half-court offense that clearly did not maximize her strengths, Caitlin Clark still led Team USA in overall efficiency. Think about that for a second. Not the starters. Not the veterans. Not the Olympic gold medalists. The player being used as a reserve was still statistically the most impactful player on the roster. That is not a coincidence. That is not media hype. That is the kind of number that destroys narratives. Because efficiency metrics are ruthless. They do not care about politics. They do not care about rotations. They do not care about coaching philosophies or locker room hierarchies. They only care about one thing: what happens when a player steps on the floor. And every single metric was screaming the same message. Team USA was simply better when Caitlin Clark was playing. The offense moved faster. The spacing improved. The transition game exploded. Defenders panicked earlier. Passing lanes opened wider. Everyone around her looked more dangerous. It did not matter whether she scored 17 points or 8 points. Her presence alone bent defenses in ways nobody else on the roster could replicate. And here is the terrifying part for everyone trying to downplay her impact. She was doing this while still being restricted. That is what made the situation impossible to ignore. Then suddenly everything changed. Not because of conspiracy theories. Not because of secret firings. Not because of behind-the-scenes drama. But because of timing. And timing in sports changes everything. The internet exploded with rumors when Kara Lawson stepped away from the team after the early games. Social media immediately turned it into a scandal. Fans claimed she had been pushed out because of the Caitlin Clark controversy. Others accused USA Basketball of panicking after seeing the backlash over Clark's bench role. But the truth was more complicated. Lawson was never fired. This transition had actually been planned before the tournament even began. She still had responsibilities waiting for her at Duke as the NCAA tournament approached, and USA Basketball had publicly stated that an assistant coach would eventually take over the remaining games. But sometimes basketball creates moments no one can ignore. Because the coach stepping into that lead role was Nate Tibbetts. And unlike everyone else, Tibbetts appeared to immediately recognize what was sitting right in front of him. He had watched every minute from the sideline. He saw the stagnant possessions. He saw Puerto Rico's defense completely expose the limitations of the slow-paced system. He saw Clark constantly forced to play inside a structure that minimized her greatest strengths. He saw the advanced metrics. He saw the film. He saw the energy change every time she touched the ball. And his first major decision told the entire basketball world exactly what he believed. He chose Caitlin Clark. Not slowly, not cautiously, not with carefully crafted political language. He simply looked at the roster and decided to unleash the player who was already carrying the tournament statistically despite playing limited minutes. That decision changed everything. Because suddenly, Team USA stopped trying to force Clark into the system. Now the system started bending around Clark. And the difference was immediate. Tibbetts did not walk into the locker room promising some revolutionary basketball strategy. He did not install 100 complicated plays overnight. He did not reinvent the roster. What he changed was philosophy. Under Kara Lawson, the rotations had looked almost mechanical. 5-player substitution waves. Entire groups entering and leaving together. Structured. Predictable. Organized. But also restrictive. Caitlin Clark often played in isolated units, separated from combinations that could truly maximize her playmaking. Tibbetts scrapped that approach almost instantly. Now rotations staggered naturally. Now Clark shared the floor with multiple elite ball handlers. Now the offense breathed. Now transition opportunities exploded. Now defenses had to think instead of simply reacting to rigid patterns. And suddenly, Team USA looked terrifying. Against Italy, the transformation became obvious within minutes. The pace picked up immediately. Clark attacked before defenses could get set. Instead of standing off ball inside half-court sets, she controlled tempo. Every possession felt unpredictable again. The ball whipped around the court faster. Defenders were constantly scrambling. And Clark? She looked free. Not forced. Not contained. Free. She finished with 12 points on absurdly efficient shooting, barely missing all night. 5 assists. 5 rebounds. And the plus-minus statistic was jaw-dropping. Team USA absolutely destroyed Italy whenever she was on the floor. But the most important part was not her individual stat line. It was what happened to everyone else around her. Suddenly teammates who struggled to find clean shots earlier in the tournament were getting open looks everywhere. Transition opportunities multiplied. Defenders collapsed toward Clark the moment she crossed half-court, creating chaos behind the defense. The entire offensive ecosystem transformed around her gravity. And for the first time in the tournament, Team USA looked like the unstoppable machine people expected them to be. Then came New Zealand. And this is where the story truly exploded. Because now Tibbetts made the move everyone had been demanding from the very beginning. Caitlin Clark entered the starting lineup. No hesitation. No delay. No half measures. The message was clear. The offense belonged in her hands now. And within minutes, the game turned into a demolition. Clark immediately buried an early three-pointer. Then came transition assists, quick reads, defensive steals, deep shooting, fast break offense. The pace became overwhelming. New Zealand had absolutely no answer. Team USA ripped through them with terrifying efficiency, ending the game in a complete 55-point destruction. And here is what made it impossible to dismiss as coincidence anymore. Clark's performances kept improving every single game once the offense opened up around her. Against Puerto Rico inside the slow system, she struggled. Against Italy with increased pace and flexible rotations, she exploded efficiently. Against New Zealand as a starter with full offensive freedom, she controlled the game completely. The roster had not changed. The talent level had not changed. Only the coaching philosophy changed. And the results spoke louder than any debate on television. By the time Team USA reached Spain, the toughest opponent of the tournament, the transformation was complete. Now Clark was fully trusted. Now she was playing starter minutes. Now the offense flowed through her naturally. And against the strongest competition they faced all tournament, Team USA still looked in control. Clark's numbers against Spain were quieter, but in some ways even more impressive. 7 assists. Smart decision-making. Controlled tempo. No forcing shots. No unnecessary hero ball. She dissected the defense patiently, calmly controlling the flow of the game like a veteran. That performance silenced one final criticism, because people had spent months arguing that Clark only thrived when dominating the ball and taking difficult shots. But here she was proving she could also control a game with precision, patience, and leadership. And when the tournament finally ended, the full statistical picture became almost unbelievable. Caitlin Clark led Team USA in total points. She led Team USA in assists. She led the entire tournament in assists. She led the entire tournament in efficiency. She led the entire tournament in plus-minus. Not just Team USA. Every player. Every country. Everyone. She shot over 50% from the field. 40% from 3. Won tournament MVP. Made the All-Star 5. And became the youngest player in tournament history to win the award. All of this happened during her senior national team debut, after missing 239 days with injuries, while coming off the bench for much of the tournament. That is the part that changes the entire conversation, because suddenly people were forced to ask a terrifying question. If this was Caitlin Clark while being partially restrained, what happens when a team fully commits to building around her? That question became the real story of the tournament. Not wins, not losses, not drama, philosophy. Because these 5 games unintentionally became a live experiment broadcast to the entire basketball world. The first half of the tournament